So Dawn and I are from Southwest Minnesota, about 6.5 hours from here. What we talked about Julia with is we're just going to kind of show you our journey, our progression, some of the do's and don'ts, what we've done. But Dawn came up with this motto for our farm a couple of years ago: farmers of life for life. So Dawn and I put this disclaimer in here, and this disclaimer has changed over the years. But the original purpose for this disclaimer was, for those of you that don't know, I served as 2 years as Minnesota State Cattlemen's president, and part of my interview process was from past presidents. As I was moving up the chain, and there was 9 past presidents sitting there interviewing me, and one of the past presidents and I are very good friends. We talk every day or every other day. And his question to me in the interview process was, if we move you up to president of the Cattlemen's Association, are you going to tell us how to run our farm and ranch? And I was just floored. I mean, here's my best friend asking this question. I thought, well, we need to put a disclaimer up there. We're not here to tell you how to run your farm or ranch. What we want to do is share our story, lessons we've learned. We're still learning lessons to this day. But the biggest thing is we want to give everybody hope that we can build more financial resilience into our farming operations. But I guess the biggest thing we want you to come away from this is to encourage you to remain open-minded to all the different possibilities that are here. There's going to be speakers after us with more and more ideas of what you can possibly take home to your farm or ranch to improve life and profitability. So we started in 1997. My mother and father started out. My father was forced into farming to raise the rest of his siblings. So they made a commitment to each other when they got married. At age 50, they would reevaluate life. Their decision was to quit farming.
It's been a tough morning. So they turned the farm over to us. We took over the farming, and it was a conventional farm. Set stock grazing. We calved in the very late winter, early spring. We bought the cow herd from them, so there was 58 cows, 450 acres. Both Grant and I worked off the farm, and then got everything done on the farm. And at that time, we were corn, soy, wheat, and alfalfa. So pretty much everything that we could do for the cows was done on those acres. And we were looking around in the neighborhood for other pasture land.
So by them quitting, it also opened up a great opportunity for us. It stopped that generational push that can be on a farm, because Dad left. He jumped in the truck, went coast to coast, and wasn't around to even help us with the farming. So when we started out, our focus was livestock because we had such limited tillable acres, grain acres. So we focused on the cattle, and it's like, why are we feeding 58 cows by this time of the year every single year? We should be out on pastures. The grass should still be growing. So we focused on grazing management. And obviously our goal was to increase the cow herd, create more income, quit feeding so much, stored feeds. And so we did enter into an EQIP contract, and this was a tough decision for me because my father had taught me to stay as far away from the government as you can, and here we are walking into a government office asking for help. Thank goodness we had some very talented people in our office, and they made me comfortable with this decision. But we started out with an EQIP contract, ran some water lines, put in some permanent fences that we wish we would have never done, but it was a way to start. It was a way to start. And we immediately noticed the difference. And when something like that happens to me, it's like, okay, we doubled production here once. We can do this again. Maybe it's going to be a little bit more difficult. But I started studying grazing management. And it was mentioned yesterday there was the MIG, the MOB. There's been so many different terms. We just call it managed grazing because we're managing these cattle and the grazing every single day of the year in different ways and forms. So initially this pasture here, we would fertilize in the spring. We'd spray shortly after that, and if we could, we'd spray a second time during the year. So we were fertilizing, spraying at least once, if not twice. And still, for some reason, about this time of the year, we'd have what Dawn would call the Christmas tree cutting party. It wasn't Christmas trees we were cutting, it was bull thistles because we were embarrassed of what the neighbors could see. And we didn't have the equipment to do it mechanically, so we did it manually. But when we changed to this style of grazing, all of a sudden those problems went away. So this is the type of forage we can grow now without fertilizer, without synthetic fertilizer, and we do not spray, and we do not have the Christmas tree cutting party in September anymore. So what we do is we try to mimic what happened in nature before we fenced the country. So there was big herds of bison that moved, elk, other animals that moved, pushed by predators or fire or storms or whatever. But when you study history, they'd move through, they'd graze a portion off, but they trample a tremendous amount because these are big herds. So that's what we're trying to do with our livestock now. So this is that same picture previous. This is a one-day graze on our farm. Do we move all of our cattle every day? No. We do try to move cattle quite often. What we've seen over the progression of this, and grass is slow to respond, but it does respond to our management system, is what originally we had 3 different grass species when we took our first inter-CS contract, to now well over 30 species that have come back from the latent seed bank and through our management of these livestock. When we were set stock grazing, this couldn't happen. There was no rest and recovery for the grasslands to do this. And through our management, we've now seen this happen. Like I said before, some of our cattle do get moved every day, some get moved every 3rd day. We farm and ranch along the Minnesota River, which is very much like the scenery we see out of our window here this morning, except not as wide, and probably we deal with a little more rock than here, but we've got some really rough areas. So in these rough areas, we initially were moving these cattle every single day and just realized it was just a labor problem, nightmare, because it took so long to move these cattle. So these cattle in this really rough country, they get moved weekly, but they're still being managed. There's still a management no matter how rough of the terrain we're on, because we know it's producing more and more forage for us. I talked about the latent seed bank that came back in the native pastures. This is right on the bluff of the Minnesota River. This is right on our home farm. My dad will tell you that this should have never been ground that got broke. It was broke before the 85 Farm Bill, and it had been farmed for a lot of years, probably 100 years near as we can tell, before we put it back to pasture. As I was learning about grazing management, the one thing I learned from that was to manage for what you want. So what we had here was Dawn and I had given up on growing corn, soy, and wheat on here. Had seeded it to alfalfa and thought if we could get 2 hay cuttings a year off of this poor piece of land, that we'd be happy with that. We'd give up putting all the inputs, corn, soy in, and just take 2 cuttings of hay. So as I had learned about managing for what we want, obviously we wanted grasses in here. So we would graze the alfalfa, but we could see the grasses coming underneath this alfalfa. Nothing was seeded out here. The latent seed bank was coming back. So we'd make sure those cows never took more than 1 bite off of that grass plant and we'd move them. Over the period of 7 years, this is what it evolved into. I would not suggest this as a financial decision because it's not a wise one. But we had the opportunity to do it. We were still getting a lot of grazing days out of the alfalfa that was there. And it took 7 years to do this. If we were to do this again, we would introduce seed. We definitely would. But I wanted to prove that we could do it. And we did it. And this is now one of the highest producing pounds of beef per acre we have. And I will get into how it went from yellow clay and sand to really, really rich soil. This is about as much grass as we used to grow when we were fertilizing, spraying. in an entire season through set stocking. No, this is the way we leave this pastures, and this is actually almost overgrazed to us now after what we've learned over these years of doing this. So these cattle are about ready to go out on to graze crop residue. I just thought I needed to take a picture of this because I was so proud of what we're leaving now compared to what we used to grow. So as we're learning this through the grazing side of our operation, we learned that through our management, if we allow nature, through our management, she is self-regulating, self-healing, self-organizing. And this comes down to our observations of what's happening to the lands that we manage. This has become very important for us that if nature is not healing itself, it's something to do with our management, or we're in extreme drought, which is still up to our management. So don't put this in there, but wait, those info commercials, but wait, there's more. And this is something that happened to Dawn and I. It's like, okay, we have basically tripled and quadrupled the amount of grazing days we're getting on our grasslands. We're no longer feeding cows in September. We're now grazing cows into December if the good Lord allows us to, with snow and weather conditions. And yet we're stuck in this corn, soy, and we still had wheat in our rotation. It's like, why aren't we doing this where we're growing grains? We finally had realized it was about soil health. So this is where we farm in southwest Minnesota. I am not proud of these pictures. I have been on the home farm my entire life. As a kid, I never saw this. This did not happen in southwest Minnesota. I never, ever remember it happening in all of my history. And this is what we see year after year after year. Soil blowing, massive amount of soil in the snowbanks, in our road ditches. So all of this is negative effects on human health, animal health. The soil structure is destroyed in the area we farm. Fertility loss, we'll get into that. And it's a cost to the taxpayers. It's a cost to all of us. It's not just the farming community. It's the entire country that pays for this in one way or another. The loss of crops and loss of trust to our city neighbors. This got brought home to us in 2020 by a neighbor. This is what we saw this spring in southwest Minnesota. The interesting part was Dawn and I went to go see this dust cloud. We could see it for 10 miles away. Drove over to the neighbors to see what it was. Interesting part is we're sitting on the road filming this, and one of our neighbors that had just retired from farming, he pulled up to us and says, well, it happened. And I just thought, Ross, you're 72 years old. This did not happen when you were a kid. And it was just his comment, this happens now. No, things have changed. So this was the eye-opener for us that our city neighbors are getting upset. During COVID, December 23rd of 2020, southwest Minnesota, we were in a blizzard warning and an air quality warning at the same time. Once again, that's never happened in my lifetime. How do you end up in an air quality warning when there's a blizzard going on? Well, this is why. There was so much topsoil movement in southwest Minnesota that they had to issue an air quality warning. Alert. When I say this costs all of us money, you can see in that top right photo, this is a county highway. The amount of topsoil in that road ditch had to be removed by the county because it was going to affect the road, because it was stopping water flow in the road ditch in the public right of way. The amount of topsoil they hauled out of there ended up being over 2,000 tons that they hauled out of just this road ditch. You would know the soil that was blowing during that blizzard didn't all stop in that road ditch. A bunch of it ended up down here. But that's what they physically removed. And we were discussing this the last 2 days while we were here, that I think in this area, somebody had mentioned that 4.5 ton is an acceptable loss per acre, according to specs. In our area, it's 6 ton is what is is considered the average loss and acceptable loss. Well, you can see here we had 6 tons just in the road ditch alone. And then Dawn and I sampled it, sent it in. Just on this 320 acres, there was estimated to be $30,000 worth of nutrients just in that road ditch alone. Just there. But the big thing is this blew into a small community, about 40 people. And we asked the gal, she works at our FSA office. I asked her, I texted her in the morning and I said, can we go take soil samples out of your backyard? Because they literally had 2 and 3 foot drifts of soil in their backyard. Their fire pit was buried by 3 feet of soil. And she sends me a message back, yeah, you can. I'll tell Craig so he doesn't shoot you in your backyard. And then she started sending me pictures, and the text messages wouldn't stop coming in. I could tell she was upset. And I finally just sent her a message, you drive by our farm every day, just let me know when you're going home if I don't see you. And she did, and we went up there. And that's when she let us have it.
She had piles and piles. You know how your screen, you got your screen and then your window. Some of their windows were over halfway filled up with soil in there. They couldn't open up their patio door because there was so much soil in there. And their yard has a border of
pine trees.
Yeah, pine trees and bushes. And that didn't even filter it out. So they had one of the largest, I thought it was, at first it was just, dirt covered snow. There was that bottom picture there was no snow in that. That's how bad this was. And she said, you farmers, you don't care about us in the city. And we had to assure her that Grant and Dawn do care. And that's why we're doing what we're doing, is we're trying to fix this. And she works in the FSA office, so she's got people that stop in the FSA office and ask her what Grant and Dawn are growing on the corner of their farm. Because they're afraid to come into the farm and ask us what we're doing. So they're getting their information at the FSA office.
So that was a real eye-opener when she said, you farmers don't care about us anymore. I thought, that's pretty sad to hear that. But this is at 320 acres where all that soil blew into the little community there. This is the next year. When we talk about soil health, soil structure, about life in the soil, look at this corn crop. And I can't remember, this has got to be in August or early September. All that's not dark green, that's corn flat on the ground already. And that was caused by a 60-mile-an-hour wind, just one windstorm. So besides making all the neighbors mad, expense to the county and us as taxpayers, this guy didn't produce a crop, which then got turned into crop insurance, and we paid for it again through subsidized crop insurance. This is not new. This is from the 30s when the NRCS, I can't remember what it was called at the time, all got started. A nation that destroys its soil destroys itself. And I will say, in the area that we farm with, and I'm not going to blame the manufacturers because they're doing what the farmer's asking for, but 600 horse tractors have not helped us in southwest Minnesota in the last 10 years. I've never seen soil degradation as fast as it's happening right now. So as Dawn and I learned this in the ranching side of our operation, we finally found that there was principles that we abide by. And they're out there everywhere, is keep the soil covered at all times if possible, minimize disturbance, both physical and chemical, increase the diversity, and we'll get into this, how we increase the diversity in our operation, keep living roots in the soil at all times if possible, and integrate livestock. For us, that was easy, and it's key to part of our success in doing this. But the big one for us was this one was added as context. Whether you're new to this in this audience or been doing this a long time in your farming and ranching, context fits every one of us differently. Do we have the financial capabilities to do this? Do we have family support to do this? Do we have generations that we need to convince to do this? There's so much that goes into context, and that's the one part that I, pretty much as the manager, missed as we were going down this road. I would go to a conference like this, and I would hear about something, and I'd run home and or we'd run home, we'd tell our folks, my folks, hey, we came up with this, and we'd implement it, not just on 10 acres, we'd do 40 or an 80. And we were maybe doing it in the wrong context because we didn't understand what we were doing. And to the point that in 2012, in the drought of 2012, we got kicked out of $38,000 worth of government disaster payments on a 400-acre farm. It was a pretty big hit. That's when we realized context was really important with what we were doing. So just keep it in mind. So this is what we've done on our farm, is obviously what was discussed yesterday, aggregate stability, however we can possibly do that by implementing the principles. And this is still, we can just step across the fence and this is what we see. No matter where we go on our farms, no matter who borders us on any of the farms we have, we can step across the fence. We do not see the aggregation in any of the soils in our neighborhood like we have on our own. It's pretty simple. Once we've been down this path, that aggregation allows air into the soil, lets water infiltration happen. But the biggest thing for us was, it's hard to see down here in the bottom, but I talked about the latent seed bank. To me, that was almost voodoo, like it couldn't possibly be after 100 years of tillage and chemical. Organic matter, to me, was something I couldn't understand. If we increase organic matter, how can we increase water holding capacity? And we've done that on our farm. We've taken soils from in the high 1% to 6%. It took time, but it's just amazing how well those soils function now. Dr. Don Rakowski was hopefully going to ride down here with us. He's become a good friend of ours because he's just a few within the vicinity of us. I didn't know he existed in the state of Minnesota until David Brandt introduced me to Don Rakowski. David was mildly horrified that Dawn and I didn't know Don Rakowski. And I'm not here to bash tillage because, as Rick explained yesterday, in an organic system we need to do tillage, but tillage is a massive disturbance to the soil. And Don always equated it to all these things happening at once in the soil. Obviously, if we have to do tillage, we know we're doing this, and then let's do everything we can to fix this in the rest of the growing season that we're using. This slide we put together a few years ago, and in certain places we go to speak, this one causes a little backlash usually. But the current model of farming, and what I mean by the current model is basically our ag input suppliers. They're telling us that we need to kill everything up there, the bacteria, the fungus, the insects, and our farm bill and our markets tell us we need to kill diversity in our farming operations. It's gotten to the point where if I'm trying to listen to ag markets and ag on the radio and it comes on, Don's like, please just shut that off when the commercials come on, because that's exactly what it is. They're trying to sell us another product or another implement to kill something. And we've learned that it's much more fun to try to work with nature and to provide life on the land. And Dr. Jonathan Lundgren, his facility is just a quick 90 minutes away from us. You know, Jonathan says agriculture as practice is causing more problems than it's solving. Yet our input suppliers tells us we'll sell you this to solve this problem. And that's where Jonathan is going with that. So it's been 12 years, I believe, since we've been 100% no-till on our operation. It was a decision that we made. We've been no-tilling since 1998. Every once in a while, through Grant's management, we end up with good side-by-side comparisons on our own farm. Grant thought he needed to custom feed a lot of cattle for extra income. So on the right, there was 360 cows wintered on that obviously killed the cover crop. And we monitored this. On the left was a fence that kept them from going in there. On the left would have been something that we intentionally planted to graze, was grazed very well through the fall, was planted into green. What we've learned down this path is soils are just like us. They function best at 70 degrees. Anything we can do to keep that soil at 70 degrees, whether it's warming up in the spring or in the summer heat, makes that soil function so much better. At 100 degrees, we're losing 15% of our moisture, or only 15% of our moisture is being used for growth in the plants we're trying to grow. And, down here it says at 140 degrees, all soil microbial life dies. I ran across some new data that shows at 107 degrees soil temperature, we're starting to lose the life in the soil. The biology that we're trying to create by using these principles is already dying at that temperature. So the first time I saw this, I thought, well, soils can't get to 140 degrees. They can. It's not that hard to get soils to 140 degrees. And it changed a lot of management that we do on our farm to try to keep enough cover on there to keep these soils cool and functioning. I said I don't want to bash tillage, but I'm gonna. Blessed to know Dwayne Beck at SDSU out there and all his research. So this picture is us and the neighbor. This neighbor refuses to change. He has been a thorn in our side. At the grain elevator, the co-op, whatever, he's always talking us down that what they're doing doesn't work. And he'll say that the only reason it works for Grant Dawn is because they got the cattle to cover their mistakes. This gentleman does not do much tillage. He does one fall tillage pass, one spring tillage pass. This was when we were going through the 2018-19 extreme rains in our area. This was the only decent rain we had that year. Was 1 inch of rainfall over 3 hours and 15 minutes. He's got water ponding already, just because of tillage and his management practices. Yeah. Dawn says Andy's family is a distant cousin. Distant cousin to my dad. But it's the one thing we did learn is that by reducing our tillage or eliminating it, our water infiltration, organic matter all increased, and our weed pressure decreased. We obviously have done a lot of work over the years with Dr. Alan Williams. We had Alan Williams up to do a field day at our farm. And I said, Alan, we need to go for a little drive. And I drove him up here. And he just looked at it, just shook his head. He's like, really? I said, yep. So our area in southwest Minnesota, Princeburg, Minnesota, has got to be the tile producing capital of the world. That is, the entire town of 100 people is just covered in tile. So pattern tiling started in our area. This, what you're seeing here, they split the tile lines again. They're now on 30-foot centers. Common practice in our area now is if they're going to pattern tile, is 30-foot centers. Alan just looked at me and he says they're just placing a Band-Aid on a gushing wound. We have tile in our farm fields. There's a few places we would like to add something, but there is no place that we farm that we need to do this to our land to produce a crop. Once again, Dr. Lundgren, by us, you can't use technology to replace biology. So we have got the biology functioning in our soils that we can infiltrate the water where it lands. We don't need to use this type of technology to fix water infiltration problems.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
I don't understand what that's supposed to do.
Oh,
Can you
okay.
explain that for me?
Oops.
Tiling.
So tiling, it's a piece of plastic perforated tile so the water can infiltrate into the tile. Tile lines are all sloped heading to the nearest watershed to get rid of surface water. The reason they are splitting the pattern tiles in our area right now is because they can't get the water to get into the tile line because of what we're doing in the top 6 to 12 inches of the soil. Yep. There's a lot of people in our area who made a lot of money in the tiling business. But on the land that we farm along the Minnesota River, we have 10 streams where we're catching that runoff from our neighbors. As I learned grazing management, and I'll tell you, I learned it from Ian Mitchell Innes. He told me, he said, you can reshape your creeks. And I did. I ran the cattle through the creeks this way. groomed down the sharp edges on the creek banks and had them to what I thought was absolutely beautiful. And then 2019 hit, and all the water coming from the watersheds from our neighbors did that to us. That cut that you see in that picture is 6 to 8 feet deep. It runs for 1.75 miles through our land and continues all the way to the Minnesota River. Imagine the amount of tons of soil lost in stream bank erosion right there. Just incredible if you do the math. I've tried to do the math and I can never get to the end of it. So we use cover crops. We try to cover crop every single acre every year unless crop rotation decides to do it otherwise. All cover crops have a place in our operation, especially Rick was talking about this yesterday and opened my eyes to it that maybe we're still not putting enough diversity in our cover crops. We do plant some pretty intense amount of species in ours, but I'm thinking we're still short. But we dug this root pit to show the different species, how it could work as part of a demonstration project. The one thing that Grant forgot about was that they had rebladed our county road 10 years before this, where we had put this test plot in. When they rebladed the road, you know, they leave you with a little bit of topsoil. I wouldn't even call it topsoil anymore. But you can see in this kit that we have built 17 inches of coal black topsoil back, to the point that the gravel that was replaced back in our fields from the road construction had turned black. Dr. Alan Williams opened my eyes to that. He's like, look at this. You turned this gravel back into black topsoil. It's not topsoil because it's still got the rock in it, but just incredible what we can do with cover crops. We can still see this road construction in our neighbor's land. We do not see this anymore. We cover cropped and grazed for 10 years along this road to fix what the county had done building the road. We now produce crops along here where our neighbors are still struggling to produce crops. So all the different rooting benefits of all the different cover crops that are out there are very important. But in our area, one of the big ag retailers tells us it's not about what's going on below the ground. It's we got to grow 300 bushel corn above the ground to get the organic matter built up. And once again, this is from Dr. Rakowski, is that studies show we get 2 to 5 times more soil organic matter from the root structure than what we're growing above the ground. And when I found that out, that's what really pushed me to try to get to no-till, which we've done. Diversity in the cropping operation, we've made it pretty much now to a third, and a third in our operation, small grains, corn, soy. But cover crops after wheat, after small grains, it's amazing what we can do to heal these soils when we got that much more growing season left. This is a cover crop. Obviously after wheat, the cattle are going to graze going into the winter. I just love this picture now after this spring. So planting green, they told everybody said, Grant, you can't plant green. Well, that was the reason for Grant to push to try to figure out how to plant green. And there are tricks to this. If you have not done it, you have got to watch nitrogen management, all types of this. In fact, in this picture, this is when we used to share a corn planter with a neighbor before the expansion. And we were last on the list of corn planter. We're planting corn here. This is not ideal corn planting conditions. The rye and triticale in that picture has obviously sucked up all the available nitrogen, so we had to figure out nitrogen management. But the interesting part about this picture is it goes back to context. I did all the corn planting. I begged and begged management to get auto steer. And she couldn't understand why I come home at night so sick and just tired. Well, when you're trying to follow a marker that's set like a one bottom plow through that on a windy day, you get out of that cab sick. And in this particular picture, I did not get done that night, and it cost us a tremendous amount of yield because it was 3 weeks before we could get to the field. Yet we had ideal planting conditions at this point in time, but I had to quit because I could not see the plant at night. So we did buy navigation. This spring, Dawn's like, we got too many acres to cover, I'm going to plant corn. One night we're driving home, and she looks at me and she says, I'm sorry. I looked at her for what? We weren't in a fight or anything. She says, I'm sorry that I made you plant for 7 or 9 years without auto steer. So this is what we're starting to work with now is termination rye at different times. The weather has not been favorable for us in our area to do this, but this is where we planted corn this spring. We knew we had to get that rye crop to the ground. We've learned that. We want the dead residue of our cover crop away from that corn plant. But this is what corn looks like coming up through that residue. It makes it. We've learned to stomp that residue to the ground if it's corn. Soybeans, we don't worry about it too much. Keep a living root in the system all the time. You know, Teddy Roosevelt's quote, do the best with what you have where you are. Well, we've converted many drills over the years to try to interseed. You know, farmers can figure this stuff out. And I encourage you to figure it out, to try to figure out how to keep that living root in the soil as long as possible. And to be honest with you, in our operation, we have not interseeded the last 2 or 3 years since we expanded the acres. We just have flat run at a time. Right now, we got a plan how we're going to change that, and we are going to go back to interseeding for next year, hopefully, if our plans come through. This is what it looks like. One of the things I started out doing when I was interseeding in between the corn is we'd plug that drill unit, that row unit, above the corn. Eventually, it's like, why are we doing that? We want seed everywhere. So we leave that open, let it fall, the disturbance of the disc, soil coming off the disc, gets cover crop to grow everywhere. And obviously, this is what it looks like at harvest. We won't have wind erosion like our neighbors at any point in the year with doing these methods of raising the crop. We drill our soybeans green if we possibly can. So our goal is to try to plant everything green if possible. Oh. The one thing that the cover crops, adding diversity to our operation, has really helped us out with, even more on the livestock side, is we calve in May. And we've had a couple springs the last few years where our native pastures are not ready to go calve on. So we'll actually run cows out on the cover crops where cash grains are going, and we'll get 2 and 3 grazings. This one here actually had 2 grazings because we didn't have any feed left to feed the cows. The pastures weren't ready. So it gave us the ability to shift and alter our operation to take advantage of a cover crop. This is how important it is to us now. If we do not have it interseeded, which we haven't the last few years, the drill is following the combine to get a living root back in that soil immediately. You know, this was last year in November already. And my son-in-law was in the drill, and he's like, you sure this is worth it? I said, don't worry about it. It'll be okay. And it did grow, and we got a tremendous amount of biomass to grow this spring. I talk about diversity. Somewhere in our farming careers, we get the opportunity to add diversity, whether it's a prevent plant or something. But I encourage you to add as much diversity, especially after listening to Rick yesterday. The diversity can be hard to deal with as far as setting drills, getting it seeded. There are all kinds of apps out there to help you with this. We still use them to this day when we're calibrating our drills. We still use the apps to calibrate them, gets us very close. This was one of our opportunities to add diversity into our operation. This was a 15 or 17 species mix. The goal here was to see how fast we could change what we thought was one of our worst pieces of soil on our farm. It was incredible what we learned from it and the data we learned from it. To the point that this was so intense, we tried to fence this without mowing. We could not do it. You could not physically crawl through this mass of cover crop. But like I said, we farm along the Minnesota River Valley, and this is one of the things that since my dad has gotten back active in our farming operation, that he talks about all the time. Anytime we have guests at the farm, he'll try to mention it. You can see we're on some slopes. At the top of that slope, that would have been yellow clay. That's the way Dawn and I took it over from Dad. That's what Dad did. That's what we know. That's what all of our neighbors have on the tops of their hills is yellow clay. This is what we've turned it into. This is what's got my dad excited about farming at 77 years old, is the yellow hills are gone. We have built 6 to 12 inches of black topsoil back on the tops of our hills. We no longer have drought issues over the tops of our hills. It's just really neat to see this. This was taken in March. This spring, the aggregation, earthworms moving, everything that we talked about as far as the principles is in place here. We've been blessed by some of the people in our community watching what we're doing, and they like what we're doing, and we've been offered a lot of land over the years. And this one, management said we weren't taking it on. The landowners wouldn't leave until we signed the contract. Because they had done 13 years of organic farming, they understood soil health, and they wanted their farm fixed. And we're still farming this, and pasturing. But we got the opportunity with them to do this. Once again, the diversity and allowing nature through our management to be self-healing, self-organizing, and self-regulating. What Dawn and I have learned is observation. Is we need to observe what's happening. If we watch our cows, they'll tell us what's going on. Just watch this cow. She's up high on the plants. She's down low. We need to spend more time observing on our farms what's happening. Not just the cattle, the wildlife, everything that's happening in our farming and ranching operations. It's just amazing if we put it out there in enough diversity what a cow can do and will. Once again, this got us back to the principles. Through that, we did everything we could to meet all the principles of soil health. This cannot be burden, drudgery, a hated move every day. You have got to be able to figure out how this fits in the context of your ranching operation, farming or ranching operation, so it's still fun. It's not a chore. The Kubota bed was always full of step-in posts and reels. There was a mess. There's other tools in there that are used in the cropping operation. I was mad all the time. We're digging through this. And finally, Dawn was so mad one day, she brings me this little slip of paper and says, build this. It took me an hour to build this, and it cleaned up the bed of that so it wasn't a nightmare anymore. This needs it needs to be quick. We cannot spend hours and hours moving cattle unless that's the only thing we've got to do. In our operation, we got other things to do. So this made it simple and clean for us. Still used to this day. Another quick and easy things. Get the wire roller to roll out quick and easy. This has been modified since, but I don't like to walk. It shows. I just lay the posts over my lap, step them in, flip the wire. It can be done very quickly. This got brought up on the trailer we were with yesterday when we were looking at the grazing, is water management. And it was brought up to me by somebody here this morning already. We got to be able to move water. We got to get water to these cattle. One of the grazing operations that we got the opportunity to take over, this particular pasture is 3/4 mile long. It's 280 acres, flat prairie. Should be $450 an acre cash rent, corn and soybean ground. Landowners want it in pasture. They want it healed. Dawn came home from a conference and said, we're going to move water tank every day. And I thought, oh God, should have never let her go. So she knew how important moving water was. So she moved a 100-gallon water tank every day, drained it, flipped it in the back of her Kubota, moved it. After a year of that, we saw what it had done by moving that water source every day. And she's like, we got to build something portable. So this is what we built. We could hold about 330 gallons of water here. It's on a 4-wheel trailer. Muddiest conditions, the Kubota can still hold it, pull it, it stays up on the top. The one thing that's not in this picture is this year we were custom grazing cattle, salt mineral, apple cider vinegars in there, and behind that was a lick tub. This producer wanted us to have a lick tub out there, so the salt mineral, apple cider vinegar is all chained together to the lick tub. Pull by this, throw the chain on the water, it all gets moved at once. Dawn was moving 280 head of yearlings. I timed her one day, it took her 12 minutes to move 280 head of yearlings. It takes us longer to drive there and get back home than anything else. Just one other thing that we've learned is, like I say, this is flat prairie, not a tree to be found for these cows. We're cleaning a water tank every day. put that brush on there, don't have to clean water tanks anymore. It's just that simple. Obviously, we manage grazing all year long. This is September, October grazing. We're constantly managing grazing. Even if we have to feed out of bunks, we're still moving bunks every 5 days, 7 days, moving them across these fields. If we're feeding on hay feeders, they're moved all the time. If we're rolling out bales, they're rolled out in different areas all the time. We manage these livestock year round. And it's greatly improved our cow health all the way through calving. It's just made a tremendous difference in our operation. We keep mentioning diversity. Our daughter forced us into diversity with laying hens, broilers, pastured hogs, and egg layers. Dawn and I were reluctant to do this because we saw another call for our labor that we didn't think we had. When we started out with the pastured broilers, we had 500 broilers out there. The first few days, it was taking me an hour and 45 minutes to get through broiler chars. I was like, there's got to be a better way. So I figured out different water systems, everything. I got it down to 17 minutes to move 500 head of broilers. From the time I left my yard with my feed pails to the time I'm back in the yard. That's what we got to look for as we add diversity to the operation. They cannot consume a lot of time. Pastured hogs, that's move them every 5 to 7 days. That needs to be done if you're out on pasture. Pastures need to be a good size. Egg layers, they're pretty easy. But it just added different income sources for our operation without tying up a lot of time. On the grain side of it, we grow all non-GMO food grade soybeans. That's a market we found for our area, $4 a bushel over Chicago. We're usually negative 90-cent basis, so that's $5 a bushel premium for us in our area. Corn, we grow all non-GMO corn. We do not have a market for that yet. All the small grains we grow, we have a market for. Going back mostly into the seed company. I knew there was a way to add more diversity into the row crop operations, so we developed a 7-grain mix. We've grown it for 6 or 7 years now. We had excess eggs. All of a sudden, we found somebody that would buy our excess eggs. They said they have to be soy-free. And I thought, well, here goes another step. So I went to the bin, got some 7-grain, blended it. The chickens, the lay rate, egg quality stayed the same. So now we hit another market where we could hit soy-free. What's happened with this 7-way is we're now selling chicken feed, which I never thought we would do. For some reason in our region, a year ago in March, everybody that was buying out of the Fleet Farm stores, their chickens quit laying. Our phone started ringing nonstop. All of a sudden, we developed a market we never even thought we had. And this is expanding quickly on our farming operation. Once again, the context side of this, if you want to make small changes, change how you do things. If you want to make major changes, change how you see things. When we started down this path, I was just looking at production. I don't care if it's pounds of beef per acre, weaning weight, bushels per acre, it's production. Finally, I got it through my head. It wasn't about production. It was about profit per acre. When we started looking at our operation and what we can do to maximize profit per acre, that's when things really changed for us. And obviously part of that is clean water, which is talked about all the time in the news. In Minnesota, we were blessed. Our Department of Agriculture had the foresight to see this program through and got it implemented. I'm not sure how many years ago. It's got to be getting close to 10 years now. It's called the Minnesota Ag Water Quality Certification Program. Most of our neighbors, it took them 2 hours to get through this program. We were in and out of the door in 25 minutes because of the practices we already had on the farm. Years later, we added the 4 endorsements because we could, because we wanted to. We're pretty proud of this. But one thing that we see in agriculture is a lot of regulation coming at us. And in Minnesota, I sat in the meeting at the DNR roundtable when Governor Dayton made the announcement. I was there. It was the first time it was announced that they're going to put a 50-foot body of water, or 50-foot strip of grass buffer along every body of water in the state of Minnesota. Well, we've got a lot of water. We've got a lot of water in our farming and ranching operation. This program kept us exempt from it. it was just neat that we didn't have to change a single thing in our operation. Like I say, we're on the Minnesota watershed. This picture is always there. It's one of the most polluted watersheds, I think, in the United States because of our farming practices in western Minnesota. But what we've learned in our journey is that it's more than just our livestock health, our crop health. This comes full circle around, and there's a lot of data being published now, research being done, and it comes back to human health. We need to start producing what we eat on healthy soils. There's direct correlation. We saw it in our ranching operation. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, but when Dawn and I started out, we were calving out of sync with nature. We're calving in winter, scour bug would hit, something would hit. We had a feed lot. We're $8,000 to $14,000 a year at the vet. Right now, we're running 4 to sometimes as much as 6 times the amount of livestock we were right then. Our vet bill last year was $1,700, and that was mostly for vaccine. Last year, in fact, we made it through the entire year on 1 bottle of antibiotic, and that was just to treat injured animals. Ian Mitchell Ennis, like I said, was one of the first guys that taught me a lot of this stuff. He said, if you build it, they'll come and charge the hell out of them for it. This is something we are missing on our farming and ranching operation right now, is we are not charging people for it. We're not to that point yet. We're getting there. But the other part of this is, when we look at it historically, it says it right in the Bible. Ask the animals, and they will teach you. Ask the birds of the sky, and they will tell you. Speak to the earth, and it will instruct you. Observation is key. It's part of what we're learning. And it just keeps coming. The more and more diversity, the more and more rare species that we see on our farming and ranching operation, and every year we see something new by our management practices we've done there. Our area is, I guess I didn't research this, but in our area in August, the sky is covered in spray planes. Absolutely covered in spray planes. We're in sugar beet country. There's 125,000 acres of sugar beets growing in our area. So if they're not spraying insecticide, they're spraying fungicide, and it's nonstop. We can probably say where we do a good job with our cover crops. This year we learned a lesson. We planted some soybeans where we didn't have cover crops. We should have sprayed for aphids, but otherwise we've made it 9 years without spraying for soybean aphid in our area, and all of our neighbors have sprayed. Do we get soybean aphid? Yes, but never at threshold levels. And just remember that when we're killing one insect, we're usually taking care of 1,700 other beneficials that are out there. So
he hates it when I throw in new slides. Basically, I mean, these are things, just kind of aha things that we've learned along the way. You know, learn to observe, use your senses. One of the things that Grant kind of always did when we were first starting out was looking at things negatively. Oh, there's a weed, you know, we got to kill it. Or there's just something. Our crops don't look like somebody else's, you know, what's wrong? It was a very negative view at things. And once you start looking at things out of a more positive context, it was amazing, all of the things, the beautiful things that were there that we just weren't paying attention to because our farming practices really didn't encourage that. Be patient with yourself and nature. That's huge. One of my lessons was on the pasture where he showed you, it's 280 acres. It's, you know, introduced pasture. And when we took it over, I've been very, very faithful at moving those cows like daily or every 2 days. And I would measure the bricks levels out there. And for 3 years, the bricks levels never changed. They stayed at 8. And I was beating myself up because I didn't I was doing everything right. Why aren't those bricks levels going up? Well, I kind of gave up on taking those bricks levels tests. And last year, we were in a drought, and I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to take a bricks level and see what it looks like. Well, here it was at like 17. And I, honest to God, I sat out there by myself and did a happy dance. I was like, oh my God. So that patience part comes into it. One of the things that anybody in this space for any amount of time will tell you is you're building your network. Every time you come to one of these events, every time you talk to somebody that has to do with soil health, you're building a network. And rely on them, reach out to them, use them to further your story, to further yourself down this path. Oh God, expect and accept the unexplainable. You're going to get a lot of what the heck was that? What is that? And you just have to give it up to faith that it's there for a reason, and then, try to find the answers to it. Operate within your risk aversion limitations. Apparently we don't have an aversion to risk, because somebody would do it big time, and we've lost a lot of money doing things that go big or go home method. And I just put this in here, don't screw it up. My God, daily, there's something that we failed at. So if you do screw it up, or you think that it's screwed up, it can be fixed. Just be patient. And then, like I just said, build your network and learn to share and be honest. David Grant was brutally honest, and we always appreciated that. He was a gem of a person. And if you didn't get the chance to meet him, go and look at his videos and his instruction, because he was absolutely the salt of the earth. He was a beautiful human being.
And share the not so good too. That helps everybody. And we started a group. We were pushed by a farmer that we mentored for the last 6 years. All winter, he was telling me, Grant, we got to start a local group. So we did. He made the calls. Dawn sent the emails. I was just there. It went from 9 people the first night to now it's 36 people. And that was before we got to the field planting. We had people calling us, can we come to this top secret coffee at your place? And we'll hear about it. Blah, blah, blah. But it's just local. And I shouldn't say it's local anymore. We got guys driving an hour and 15 minutes one way to come to this because they feel it's so important. So that network's really important. But education is one of the missions on our farm. This was something we realized that we absolutely needed to do about 10 to 12 years ago, is we need to try to help educate those who are ready to be educated. It says, let each of you look not only to his own interest, but also to the interest of others. To us, that's very important. This picture, the lower left, the lower right, is what really brings it home for us. It says in Proverbs, and let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another. A month ago, we got our eyes opened. There's a local new seed company in our area. They know what we're doing. They said, would it be possible for you to host 3 farmers from Kazakhstan? Sure, we're open. So the 2 on the right, closest to the front here, and the one on the left, those are the 3 from Kazakhstan. These gentlemen manage 125,000 acres of row crop land in Kazakhstan and twice that much pasture land. And by us opening up, hopefully we're going to have an influence on that many acres. These gentlemen came to us and they told us that when we were under Russian control, you farmed to buy a book. In a way, I think that's what a lot of us do here also. But what they proceeded to explain to us when they were under Russian control is if you did not farm by that book, if you did not plant into 4 inches of well-tilled soil, you disappeared at night. Now that doesn't happen here, but that was a real eye-opener for us. And now these guys have the freedom and the ability to hopefully change their operation. It was a really neat experience. I guess open my eyes to see the wonderful truths in your instruction. I am only here, a foreigner in the land. And really, that's all we are. We're just tenants of this land. So let's do everything we can to make it better for those that take it over after us. So with that, thank you.